welcome back to another great episode of Dreams, Dollars, and Destiny. I'm your host, Portia, joined by my two friends, Mr. Nicholas Westbrook and Miss Melinda Valentine. We welcome you guys back. If you're here for the first time, welcome. And to those who are, not new, then welcome back. So we also want to say thank you to those who support us week after week. Definitely like, subscribe, and share this channel with more people who can enjoy and benefit from the information that we're bringing each week. Now, as you know, we try to hit home with the hard topics, and today is no different. And we're getting ready to get into this 4th of July celebration. And this year is supposed to be one for the record books, right? Because it's America's 250th anniversary. So it's one of those landmark anniversaries and where a lot of fireworks and fun for the holidays going to be happening. But, we also got to keep in mind and perspective the Black experience here in America, right? Just because America is celebrating 250 years of freedom, that doesn't mean that's our story, right? So while they have their version of history, we have a parallel version of history that includes slavery, broken promises, stolen wealth, systemic depression, and freedom that always comes with an asterisk, right? So we didn't put the KKK in the title just for shock value, just in case you guys are wondering. And no, we didn't misspell it either. We put it there because the fabric of this nation is actually sewn with a thread of racial terror. And that's for many Black Americans that live here. And that is really true to this day, especially with the more recent events that have been happening here just within the last days, right? I can't even say weeks or months. It's just within the last days. So as the country puts itself in, as far as a quarter of a millennium of existence, we have to say that our existence here in America is definitely not the same as what they're painted to be apple pies and blue skies, right? So when will we truly be free here, right? This is our land, right? Our land that was stolen, and we are still not free to this day. We being enslaved on a systemic level, on a mental level, economic level, right? And we talked about healthcare, yes, on our last episode. So there's so many ways that we're being enslaved, and sometimes just because you're not wearing the actual metal cuffs on your arms doesn't mean that you're still not in prison, right? So we're going to dive deeper into what's going on with this country right now as we celebrate the 250th anniversary of Amerikkka. So which one of you guys want to kind of kick this off tonight? I know we got a lot to say on this topic. We can say a lot as far as what's going on recently, or we can start from the past, however you want to do it, but let's go ahead and get started.
Let me get started by just reading a quick passage from the book The Fall of America by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. If white America wanted to free her slaves, she could easily do so. This would be simpler and easier than what she is doing, killing and provoking them through police force, National Guards, finally the U.S. Army, as we see in different cities around the country. America's actions show us two things. Firstly, she wishes to cause fear among the so called Negroes with the display of many deadly weapons, but a law is removing that fear. Secondly, she fears to approach her unarmed slaves unless she is armed. This has been the historical relationship between the white man and his slave. So, not much has changed since then. So, that's just what I wanted to open with, and then I will go ahead and land right there.
Yeah, and I'll contribute to the laying of the groundwork and say that when we talk about these concepts of freedom and bondage, or freedom and slavery, we, of course, we have to recognize that these concepts have transformed and taken on new looks and new forms historically up to the present day. So when we talk about when will we be free, or if we're free, or what does freedom look like, I would say that it's complicated. Like Portia, like you said, there's a lot of places we can take this conversation, and honestly, it's so much that it's too much to fit into one conversation. We're gonna give a condensed version of it and talk about it as comprehensively as we can, but this honestly should be an ongoing series because there's so many aspects to it, and like Melinda uh, mentioned, you have physical slavery, but you also have mental slavery too. And then we also have to take into account that we've been awarded some freedoms, and I say freedoms plural, as an individual examples of things that we're able to do now and benefit now that we weren't able to do in the past. And then there's also what's still what's still being affected by external forces versus what we're imposing on ourselves. So it's a very dicey and complicated topic, depending on how technical you want to get with these terms and what direction you want to take the conversation. But I would definitely say we're not where we should be in terms of freedom versus bondage.
That's true. And, we keep bringing up that word freedom, and it keeps making me go back to Martin Luther King's speech, right? When he talked about freedom and how freedom was supposed to be every little black boy is supposed to be able to play with a white kid and all this other good stuff. And I don't know if that really was our freedom, right? Integration was definitely not our freedom. I think our freedom would have come with us having our own establishments, our own economy, our own communities, and things like that. And we could have been free within that to operate and build our own, system of wealth within the infrastructure of America. But some other people, right, didn't like that idea. And that's why systematically over 160 years, they have been dismantling black wealth wherever they can, destroying and demolishing anything that has to do with any type of wealth or economic advancement in our communities. We get slighted for some of the smallest infractions. When they talk about building low economic housing, there's tax credits for that, but where they're always being built? In our neighborhoods, right? There was a big pushback and there's lawsuits when they talk about building low economic housing near the quote unquote good side of town, or whatever you want to call it, right? So on all levels, while we are being suppressed and kept in a cage or in a corner because the system is designed that way. And yeah, we can point to a few black billionaires like Oprah, Jay-Z, LeBron, and all those good people. But when we look at the overall arching picture, there's only a few that have made it that far. And then you have to look at, well, what are they doing to improve our communities? That money never comes back. That money never comes back. It never comes back in the form of education, like they could open up schools. It never comes back in the form of opening up organic or healthy food stores in the neighborhoods. It never comes back in the form of any type of economic development that will give us an edge. Now they're all about gentrification. And so we get pushed out of our neighborhoods as well now, right? Neighborhoods that were originally black, like Harlem and things like that, where now you're starting to see pale people walking around like it's normal. So we're being edged out systemically on all levels. And what I'm talking about is ownership, right? At the ultimate level, because ownership equals freedom. And the more they take away the ownership, the less freedom we have as a people.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And, it's crazy that it's 250 years later and we're still basically asking, what does that freedom look like for Black Americans, and justice for who and safety for who? Obviously, all of this stuff that you just said, we've kind of touched on those topics, the transference of the Black wealth out of the community. We've done shows around all of these topics, and this is just bringing kind of to the forefront that the country is 250 years old. And since 1776, Black Americans are still asking what freedom actually means and what it actually looks like, because we still haven't really fully experienced it. And, I think that is seen, very poignantly through all areas of activity, especially politics, especially news media, and in law. The law is really a place where you can see the discrepancy, and also economics. A lot of the slavery and the oppression that shapes the economic realm is, basically when people go to buy these houses and all that and they're going to rent, they put all these stipulations in the thing that they know black people don't have. Like you got to have like a 750 credit score. You got to have this 3 times the income. Like they do things and they use certain language that lets you know that this is not for you, unless you have reached over a certain threshold. So, we have to get to a point in America where freedom is just not symbolic, and that's where, mainstream kind of frames it. They kind of frame, oh, this is the land of the free, but that's just symbolic freedom. The actual freedom is not actually being experienced by the people who experience the most injustice at all. So 1776 didn't make black people free. Black people weren't free when they signed that constitution. 1865 made us free, but it didn't make us free in other ways, like mentally, and it didn't make us safe. Civil rights laws didn't end, racialized treatment, voting rights, and all this stuff, fair housing, education, healthcare, all of that stuff is still being oppressed in red lines and different things like that. So freedom is not just the absence of the chains that were physically on us; it's the presence of protection and power and ownership and self determination. And these are the things that we still have yet as a community to experience. Like Nick said, a lot of us individually have experienced that, but as a community, we haven't. And if freedom does not protect our children, our homes, our bodies, and our votes, or our future, then we're not free and we don't have full freedom.
That's true. And, another thing is the legal system, right? Because we can talk about the legal system at length because throughout the history of America, they have used the legal system against us in all ways. And even to this day, right, we can talk about the case that's going on now with Carmelo Anthony. The tapes clearly see that those boys had attacked him. But the fact that he stood up for himself and saved his own life and took the life of another person instead, now he gets thrown under the jail. Whereas there's the white killer that killed those black people in South Carolina in that church, Dylan Roof, they take him by Burger King before they drop him off at jail. So we know that there's a lot of inequality and injustice within the legal system, and they don't want to change the laws, right? They always want to keep it in their favor. And it is hard for us to navigate that system because those laws have been written against us. I realized that in the 1980s when they wrote the law with crack and cocaine. Oh, you get a little bit of powder on you, you get a little slap on the wrist, but you got that rock, you gonna get locked up for life, right? And they knew the demographic on that, right? Who had the powder? The white rich people. Who had the rock? The low income, class people who can't afford, the powder. So at
And
the
they
end,
knew that because they dropped the rock in the neighborhood. So they're the ones that gave
oh
us the rock.
yeah, oh
So that's
girl,
why they knew that
go
too.
back. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We all know that was the CIA setup, right? And they were
And
getting
Ronald Reagan. Yep.
by the Reagan administration, and no one went to jail behind that. No one went to jail. There was no prosecution. Oliver North got a slap on the wrist, and everybody moved on, and life was perfect. So and then on top of that, we thought that when Obama came in office, everybody, oh, they go freedom, there's change, and every Black American household had Obama on the wall like he was Jesus. They were praising him, knowing that change was about to come. And once you saw that nothing happened after that, because Trayvon Martin was unalive during his presidency, and we had a couple of other Black lives that were lost over the 8 years Obama was in office, and there was nothing that he could do. There was nothing. Anytime he spoke out against them, they came out against him. So where in that is the justice? Where in that is the freedom? And when will we be able to utilize the law system, legal system? Because we do have Black attorneys, Black judges, and things like that. But we're not ahead in the system, even if they are present. So when are the laws going to change in our favor? When are things going to work out for us in the end when it comes to the legal system? Because we already know they have the prison to pipeline system where they did it through the music, programming our kids through the music to think that selling drugs and thugging was cool. So you can land up in jail and spend 25 to life when you 20 years old, right? So that's all your life wasted in jail. And now it becomes a revolving door for these young people because they think that that's cool, right? The programming.
Yeah, the media is a whole branch in of itself because you mentioned the music industry, but the remember the legal system is also attached to the media too because there are certain stories that get amplified and pushed to the forefront. So it, not only we are experiencing disparity within the justice system, but the media depiction contributes to that, and it's also omitting the the stories and the cases that don't fit that narrative too. So all of it, all of these factors are in cahoots with each other.
Yeah, they're definitely in cahoots with each other. And, it really speaks to a lot of the works that our scholars and our community have already done. They have really laid the blueprint for us. And if we would just go ahead and study them and really, start doing things along the lines of some of the blueprints that they laid out, we could maybe affect some change. I do think it's going to take really a lot of like all of us together, because again, we do have 1.7 trillion dollars of spending power in this country. I know we're going to get into some of the current events and some of the stories that are happening now where we're using some of that power, and we're not even calling it a boycott. It's a wealth transfer. It's a wealth transfer, because we're going to transfer all the wealth that we as a community put into other communities that disrespect us and all that kind of stuff, and transfer that back to the Black community. So I think it just comes down to us realizing that we are all we got. Like, and I also wanted to mention a little bit about what you said about Obama. Yes, because again, symbolism, right? This is where I'm talking about this symbolism and this idealism of, oh, he's a Black man, so y'all had a Black president. Well, first of all, let's correct the record. His mother is white and his father he's from Africa. So he's not, yeah, he's not a foundational Black American.
No, he's not.
Okay, he's not a foundational Black American. So I'm not saying that makes him not care about our plight, and he grew up here, so he understands the plight. He sees it, he knows it. He's a very smart, intelligent man, Barack Obama. But at the end of the day, that's not his lineage. So really, we haven't had proper, representation as far as a first Black president. Because to me, that does not make you the first Black president. That makes you maybe the first president that's melanated, but you're not a Black American. So you don't have the same issues that we have, and you don't care about the same things that we care about. And not only that, we know that presidency, all of that stuff is a facade. That person that's in that seat is a puppet master. They have to listen to those bloodlines that we have discussed on previous episodes, those families that own and control all the wealth and own and control the power in the world. That's who the real president is. So even if we did, first of all, a foundational Black American is not going to get in there. They're not going to allow it under their purview. So that's the first thing. Second thing, even if they did get in there, what really could they do to change things because of all the power that has been amassed? Understanding, we can say the 250 years, but they've been planning this way before 250 years. It's just that 250 years marks them, signing the Constitution here, but they've been doing this way longer. This plan has been put in action a long time ago by a bunch of powerful people, and it's continuing to live itself out through legacy. And that's another thing that gets transferred down through DNA. It gets transferred down through the legacy and through the family. So when people say we shouldn't get reparations and all that, or we weren't slaves, yes, we are, and we are our ancestors. So just like y'all pass down y'all's wealth, trauma gets passed down through our community. So, at the same time, like I said, all this symbolic freedom has to go. All that face valueism has to go of, oh, we're free. We're really not. And I think we see that, like you said, through all of these different areas of activity, especially law. That's like the main one, law and the media, that and entertainment. So I'll say law and entertainment. Those are the main two that they use to kind of oppress us and put also a picture out there in people's minds about us, to create those stereotypes, to create that mindset about us being the lowest of the low and all we are is ignorant and this, that, and the third. So it's all by design, and it's going really, I think the timeline is shifting, but things are happening that to push us toward it. I just think it's coming, but I do think it's slow moving and slow building. So we'll just have to see how it works out. But at the end of the day, yeah, all this symbolic fake freedom got to go, because that's all it is. It's fake, and the narrative is fake, and they run with it because they're so ignorant. Like when you honestly look at the behavior of the dominant society, They're the most immature, ignorant people on the face of the planet Earth. And that I'll land there.
Not to mention violent. They are definitely the most violent group. And that is why, we live in such terror, right? They terrorize us, we don't terrorize them. And that's what crazy because they spin the narrative like we're the savages, we're the beasts, right? We're the ones supposed to be tamed, when really they need to be locked up in the cage, right? And for all the atrocities they have committed for centuries, if not millennia. And it's well documented wherever they go, they cause destruction, chaos, and havoc. No island they ever showed up on ever was the same afterwards. Whether they brought disease, whether they brought war, whether they brought enslavement, right? They never brought anything good. They never came in peace wherever they went, right? The stories are documented from Europe all the way to the Caribbean islands, but all the way to the Americas, right? And every country pretty much can tell you the same story of how either colonialism or slavery, right, changed the landscape of their country. Colonialism is nothing but a nice word for slavery, right? Because you're still under their rule when you're talking about colonialism. You have to follow their rules, their language, and their custom. So all your identity, all your heritage, all your culture gets erased, and now you have to assimilate to the dominant culture, and you no longer have a history, right? And that's why so many of us have been brainwashed to think that we're not united. Whether you're from Jamaica, whether you're from the Dominican Republic, whether you're from Argentina, if you're a melanated person, guess what? You're black, right? You're Afrocentric. You're from that bloodline. And so we should also come together no matter what continent or country you're from, because we are fighting the same dominant culture that has been oppressing us for hundreds of years. And that's what I don't understand is that people from these other countries, they look down on us for the things we're going through over here, right? But y'all are going through the same thing, right? And it's just the same story over and over again. It's oppression, it's colonialism, and it's just basically a whitewashing of their society.
Divide and conquer tactics. They, we're feeded narratives about melanated people in other parts of the world. Melanated people in other parts of the world are feeding narratives about us, and it just causes and drives the division between us. So that's all intentional too.
I agree with Nick 1,000%, and I'll double down on that by saying that that's exactly what happens. And then what ends up happening is when they do come here, the what compounds that is they don't know the history, right? Because we're all taught the fake history. So everyone is taught that same fake history. So that's what they don't know the true history of Black Americans, the true history of freedom fighting, the true history of our ancestors who have fought tooth and nail every since the colonizers got here. Like there was a faction of us, if not mostly all of us, that wanted to fight them. And you do have some that sold out for trinkets. So we know the story, but at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying? Like it's the truth. It's the divide and conquer, and then it gets compounded with fake history, with fake news cycles, or with pushing certain narratives in the news and pushing certain things out there and hiding and suppressing other news that is more diabolical than any news that we could ever produce. So, it gets compounded by all those things. And then the other thing that compounds it is the immigrants get to come here. And then what they do is all of the rights that we secured through civil rights and through a lot of other bills that we fought for us, that language got hijacked. So instead of that saying for foundational Black Americans or for Black Americans specifically, it says people of color and all this kind of different stuff now allows everyone else to come in and get those benefits. And trust me, they know everything. We don't even want to get into Big Brother. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother show. But Big Brother is real and it's true. They know exactly who the Black Americans are, and they know exactly who the immigrants are. Of course they know. They let them in the country. So it's tracked. Everything we do is tracked. So they know when the people come to get loans and stuff, and you got to fill out that paperwork, you got to fill out your background and your history and all that and who you are. And when they see that it's that, they get specific loans to come set up in our neighborhood. They get business loans and grants, and they get loans for homes that we are systematically excluded from getting. And I know you've seen that, Portia, working in the industry you work in. There's a lot of disparity in real estate for Black Americans. And the thing is, we got to get specific. So this is a part of that 7D cultural centrum principles. That first D is delineation, and it's not to divide and continue to divide and conquer, but right now we have to work on our own community. We don't got time to be worrying about immigrants and other people who are melanated that are not on code, that don't understand, or they feel like they never experienced racism or whatever. Okay, you want proximity to the dominant society, that's okay if that's who you want to be, but that's why we have to get focused on our community and start focusing on solutions for our community, which we're starting to do. And this is not to down anybody, because if you're on code with me, I don't care what color you are. If you're on code and you're doing the right thing, because right is right and wrong is wrong. It's either justice or injustice. Okay. So if you're on code with that, it doesn't matter what color you are. This ain't about being racist or nothing like that. This is about taking care of your own, which is no different than what everyone else does in society. Every other community takes care of their own. The Chinese, the Jamaicans, the Haitians, all of them, they all take care of their own, right? So we have to start doing the same thing. And I don't like the fact that we get picked on for it. And I don't like the fact that we get called names for xenophobia and all that. No, they don't know the history that we've been through in this country. It's time for us to stand up for ourselves, and that's what we're doing. And I'm proud of our people for doing it. I wish it was happening a little faster, but it's not. And I just wanted to show this to show people that it's not that long ago. So if you look at the scale, you got 1625 here where it starts out a little bit, and then you got 1725 here, 265 years or some odd years of slavery. And then in 1865, when the Civil War was over, then you got the 99 years of segregation, and then you got the so-called free years from the 60s on, so-called free. Okay, and that's only been 50 years. But look at how much we have accomplished in those 50 years. Because we have accomplished a lot, but there's still a lot to go. Look at all this history that we have to go through. So it's not that, people want to say, oh, that was a long time ago. It's really not that long ago. It's really not that long ago.
No, and then thanks for putting that in perspective, Queen. You're right. It wasn't that long ago. People have amnesia, and a lot has happened within those years. And to speak on what you were saying about the housing, now the federal government does have fair housing, and they do tell realtors, not to discriminate based on nationality, color, religion, all that stuff, race. But it does happen, right? They did a story in Long Island where they went undercover. They had some testers come in, African American, Latino, Asian, and white, to this real estate office just to see how these realtors were going to treat them. Because remember, they're supposed to treat everybody the same. Well, they rolled up the white carpet for the white person, right? I mean, the red carpet for the white person. They were going to take her around. She didn't have to be pre-approved. She already sent her a list of homes. And then the black person, she had to be pre-approved. She needed the CID. It was one thing, and after this and that, and then trying to steer her to like the black neighborhoods or to the hood kind of areas where they think black people gather. So that mentality, unfortunately, is still insidious and is very prevalent to this day. And although we do have the fair housing laws, you do have some realtors out there, because everybody's independently owned and operated, right? They're self-employed, who have their own biased opinions when they come to dealing with, customers and clients. And so that is something that we're always combating as Black people, is who do they want us to be, right? And we're always constantly shifting ourselves, whether we're at work or at home, because the person you're at home can't be the person you're at work, because you have to show another face. And that is very tiring, right? You feel like you can never be yourself in a work setting or anywhere else, because you're frowned upon for being Black. And that is another thing that I think this country does to us, as far as that psychological mind game they play with us, with sisters having natural hair. Oh, you can't have natural hair, you need a permit. The school system telling kids they can't wear certain things, if it's ethnic. I mean, there's so many things that they put against us that you question if what you are is right. And a lot of kids, I mean, they did the study a long time ago where they had dolls, and they had little black girls come in, ask them which doll they wanted. They always chose the white doll. Why did you choose the white doll? You're Black. Oh, because it's better. So that's ingrained in them since
Yeah, that's the good doll, and they say the black one is the bad doll. Now,
exactly.
I wonder where kids got that idea from.
Exactly. They're very perceptive. And I also like to go back to Haiti real quick. I just want to touch on that. because Haiti is actually the first only black country I know of that actually fought and won their freedom, right? They chased the Europeans out of their country, but unfortunately, they were punished by that and they got cut off economically, and that's why Haiti is such in a bad shape. But the economic power that Haiti could have, right, if they were able to sustain their own, would be awesome. Because, like I said, they ran the colonizers out of Haiti, right? They did what they had to do. If they were able to expand their territory further, Haiti could have been a powerhouse. But we see what it's like to have your own freedom, and then you get cut off economically from the rest of the world. So you get punished. You damned if you do, and you damned if you don't, because Haiti was not rewarded for gaining their freedom. They were punished for that.
There's always been a consequence when when we push back or fought back. So I can see that. I can see how that has discouraged. I mean, aside from on the collective level, the masses being neutralized with all of the different type of quote unquote weapons that we have now, that we discussed on this program, from the food to the media, to all of those areas of human activity. But aside from us being neutralized from those, there's also a fear based on those historical examples and those consequences of when we did fight back. And then we also talk about fighting back in less direct ways. Of course, we fall back in terms of hand-to-hand conflict, wars, and bloodshed, but we also fall back by building our own economic systems, and we witnessed or we study the history on the results of those and the consequences of those. So there certainly is an element of fear when it comes to fighting for our freedom, because a lot of people get on platforms such as these and talk about freedom and talk about what we should do and what we need to do. But the question is, are you really willing to do what it takes to get free? Because freedom ain't free. It comes with a cost.
Yeah, and look at Burkina Faso, right, and Ibrahim Traore and what they're doing in Africa, right? And they actually gained their freedom, and they're a powerhouse, right? They're an economic powerhouse. They're keeping their resources for the people. The people are benefiting from the economic benefits that they're getting from selling the resources themselves. I mean, that is what we are fighting for, right? We're fighting for the right to have our own economy, our own sustaining government, in our own communities where we don't need anything outside of ourselves, but we can sell to other countries or other entities and make money. Because I think that they're a perfect example of how Black people can unite, come together, and build something great and become a fortress, because that military is keeping everybody out. And, I know that these Europeans are looking at Burkina Faso, and, they want to take it down, right? Anytime Black people get an upper hand on anything, they want to sweep the leg from underneath them. And so I just know, right, the way history plays out, that they'll probably target them there shortly. But it seems to me that those people got the right idea, and maybe we should look at what they're doing in Burkina Faso to see if there's something that we can replicate here in the United States.
Yeah, and like I was just saying, is that has to be something that we are willing to do. Like, are we willing to die for this freedom? Because that's what it ultimately comes down to. Essentially, you said the military. They have a military. Are we willing to create something like that? Are men? Am I, as a man, am I willing to join the military? And if it comes down to it, put in that work that needs to be put in. Like, these are the type of questions and conversations that I don't know. It's like the elephant in the room that people, they kind of dance around. Like, people. I guess people act like or have these discourses in the sense that, okay, we can be free by, just creating this media and talking, and talking about it, or just starting businesses, and then, okay, that's it, that's the safe way to do it. It's, I
No, that
mean,
ain't the way to do it, though. I mean, it
yeah,
has to be by any means necessary. I mean, freedom, freedom always comes with a price, and unfortunately, sometimes that may include death. But if you believe in something, you're willing to put your life on the line for it. And that's what our ancestors did with the civil rights movement. I mean, we've seen the pictures and the footage of people being attacked by dogs, sprayed with water hoses. Some of the worst atrocities that could ever be done to people that were peaceful. Remember, these were peaceful protests. They were Martin Luther King. He was all about the peace. He wasn't trying to shoot up a place or do anything like that. They were out there picketing, but here come the water hoses, the dogs, and being attacked. So, but those people were willing to endure that for what they believe, and they believed in the right to vote.
yeah, 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 and then I think I talked about this in the previous episode about our condition being much worse back then. I think they've given us enough distractions and enough things to make us comfortable enough to where, yeah, things are bad, but we just kind of deal with it because we still enjoy a level of comfort, So
You're right.
will
And you do have people who are not going to want to rock the boat.
yeah, yeah. Will we get to that point where we're truly uncomfortable, or will they just keep pushing us along and keep giving us just enough to where we're comfortable and we won't push back too much because I think things aren't bad enough, you know.
They're bad, but they're not worse, right? And
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you still can deal with it, right? That fire is on low heat; it's not on high. So I'm just gonna roast a little bit, but I ain't burning. You know,
Mhm.
I'm just roasting over here.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I still got my job, I could still go out to happy hour, I could still watch my shows and all that. So yeah, it ain't that bad. I could still go on vacation and do all these things. So
creatures of comfort,
yeah.
right? Creatures of comfort. That's what we are.
Yeah.
We get comfortable in these little nooks and crannies and think that that's life. And at the end of the day, we're really not living the life of sovereignty the way that we should be. Before 1913 and all this other good stuff, people lived free in America, right? They lived sovereign. They did what they wanted to do. They ran their own businesses, their farms, and all this stuff. There were some powers that be that created this structural institution that we're in right now that doesn't fit everybody. And for me, you're right, Nick, when you're saying that if we're all willing to come together to do this, then it could work. But we already know that there's going to be some of us that's not. It makes me go back to the whole Irv Gotti and I think it was Jay Prince and them. They were getting ready to own their own distribution company, and then Jay went and told somebody, and they broke all that up, right? So there's always going to be one of us that's going to go back to them. Hey, they planning something over there. Yeah, y'all might want to go and break it up, blah blah blah. And it's happened time and time again. And it's that Judas person, right? That's who I call the one who's always going to betray the people. So I mean, I don't know how we can get around that. What you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm of the perspective that, yeah, you can get. I feel like we could probably get a good number of people together, but I don't think they're. Whenever someone talks about we all need to do something or we all got to do, it's like you almost got to stop listening because you'll never get 100% everyone on the same page. So, but I do think we can do enough to make some movement, and then it's also about small incremental progress over time. It's like getting those base hits instead of swinging for the fences every time, and then compounding those small victories until it grows into something bigger. But yeah, I agree. There'll always be a a percentage of the population that'll either betray us or either just won't be with it. Like, nah, I like how things are now, so I don't want to take
I
that
don't
risk or put myself at risk.
Yeah, I don't want to change nothing. I'm comfortable over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to get everybody uniform and on the same page, I think that's going to be the monumental task to do. And then on top of that, we need to stop looking for permission from the dominant class. I think a lot of us are looking for permission from them to operate within this framework instead of us saying, hey, we're going to have our own, regardless of what goes on with them or how they try to bring us down. We're prepared to defend ourselves by any means necessary,
Yeah.
because that's what ultimately happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the KKK doesn't represent the dominant society because they have no problem with us being separate from them and other groups like that. You know, who was it that met with the KKK? Was that Marcus Garvey? I forgot who it
Yes,
was.
that was Marcus.
Yeah, it's
That was,
Marcus Garvey. Yeah.
yes, that was Marcus Garvey, and I'm gonna say something real quick about that because to me, I did a show not about that, but he came up in it because I did the show about Carter G. Woodson, and Carter G. Woodson was the first Black American to delineate because when Marcus Garvey came here and he was trying to do all that meeting with the KKK to try to figure out how to send Black Americans to Africa, not Jamaicans, because he's Jamaican. And on his island of Jamaica, they didn't even fool with him like that. A lot of them down there because of the kind of stuff that he would say. But he was, to me, was the first one because Carter G. Woodson, he wanted him to come like be in it on with him. And Carter G. Woodson was like, kick rocks. And then he stopped working with him and stopped doing stuff with his magazine that he had at the time. But he basically was like, I'm not meeting with my oppressors to try to send me out of my country. See, because Carter G. Woodson knew that this was his country. He knew that this was, this is our country. We don't need to go back to anywhere. This is where we are from. So, whoever did come over here, this is also where they're from too. It's no going back to that. There's no going back to that. You go back to that, you're not the same people as that. You had ethnogenesis. You had an ethnogenesis and you're now a different ethnicity and you have a different culture based on your last 500 600 700 years of history or whatever the case. And one thing that I do want to add on, because when Portia was talking about Haiti, you are absolutely right about that, Queen. And what's so messed up about that is not only did they cut them off, but Haiti had to pay reparations back to France. That's another reason why they're so poor and so broke, because anything that they do get, they got to pay France that money. So how the hell did they, they're the ones that ended up paying. Yeah. So they got to pay reparations to France, and they're sanctioned. They got sanctioned and cut off through sanctions and through different things like that from the United States and like these, the world organizations or whatever, that when they get together to meet,
right?
Who they go to sanction, right? So they did that because you're right, because that was their, their punishment for gaining their freedom. So I'll land there. I know I'm kind of in and out. I got some technical.
No, but that was right though. I mean, just going back to that, we did try to obtain our freedom, and when it happens, it's a perfect example of with Haiti, right? Anytime we try to have our own, we talked about that with the black wealth and how it gets transferred or stolen or what have you. So it's just, for me, there is no answer right now. I mean, this is a topic, this is a discussion that we're going to have to keep having in order for us to understand just the layers and the dynamics of it first before we can even decide to put pen to paper as far as a plan, because it's happening on so many levels. And then it's like, okay, well, is it possible for us to go buy some land somewhere and live freely with no interruptions, no interference from outside groups, and we can have our own sovereign town, city, or what have you? I mean, we could possibly operate within this framework. Some people think going back to Africa is the answer. I don't know, right? I just don't know. I would say going back, well, we were never there to begin with. So it'd be going to Africa, right? To create your own.
Exactly. We ain't going back nowhere. Like, how you gonna tell somebody to go back somewhere? If anything, the Europeans need the ones that go back. They the ones that came over here on the ships.
But
Y'all
I
go
was
back to
saying, like,
Europe.
could you operate within the American framework to have your own sovereign community or city, or would you have to go out of this country in order to achieve that?
Well,
That's the
I'm
question.
fighting for us to be able to do it here. Yeah. I want us just like Chinatown. Every city got a Chinatown. Every city got to have a foundational Black American base.
Well, they
We
got the
should all
Martin Luther
have our
King Jr.
own.
Boulevard. That's how you know you're on the black side of town. Anytime you see MLK, right, you're like, oh, okay, this is the black side of town. See, that's already been labeled.
Well, yeah, that's how they set it up too. So
Yeah,
they
exactly.
can
They
know.
wouldn't
They
put
can
him
know
on
the
the,
board. They know all the borders. They know them because they
they
drew
wouldn't
them,
put his name in
and
the
they're
white
redrawing
neighborhood.
them now with the voting stuff. They're redrawing borders as we speak with the voting suppression stuff that they're doing.
Oh yeah, they rolled back the
Yeah,
1960s Civil Rights and Voting Act. Yeah.
yeah. Their main thing that they do in their society is move the goalpost. Soon as a nigga leaps over their goalposts, they move the damn goalpost. That's what they do. Soon as we break a barrier, they change the goalposts. They're not operating fairly.
No, they're not. They're not.
Yeah, and we like you're saying about these layered conversations. That's a that's a challenge in itself because we kind of get stuck in that because the conversations we we're having now and the conversations that we need to have, we were saying this 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. and then it's like we get caught up in that cycle of survival that the conversation and the action plan gets put on the back burner, and then 50 years later we got to have the conversation again.
You're right. It's like we have amnesia. We don't keep the topic in the forefront, and there's just not a lot of people who, like you're saying, Nick, are uncomfortable enough to want to push forward with this, and they're not willing to do this by any means necessary. Because again, it's good. I think Queen cut out for a moment, but when we're talking about Burkina Faso and what they're doing over there, and Ibrahim Toure, and how they have their own system, their own economy, and no one right now can mess with them, right? All these powers that be, these European countries, they want to come in and invade Burkina Faso because they can't stand to see a nigga in charge and actually running something that is profitable, right? And that they're benefiting from their own resources because Africa for so long, they've had the resources, but they never could benefit from it because these European countries will vulture on their culture and take away everything that they had and never give it to the people. But now we're seeing that it actually can be done and that you can be sovereign within that framework. But a lot of people are like, well, how long is that going to last? Right? It's a shame.
Yeah, so I do love Troero over there in Burkina Faso. Actually, was trying to plan to do a presentation around him and what he's doing because I like to look at this from different angles and see what can we do as a whole, as a nation as a whole. Like, and now I'm talking about the whole melanated nation on the planet Earth to come together. And I do think that, the Black Americans, I do think that we should have a great working relationship with our brothers in Africa, with our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. We do need to have those relationships and those resources because those countries are where we can kind of get some of the resources that we need to build what we need here. So we do need to cultivate good relationships with them. And I felt like when Ibrahim was doing everything and he was kicking the French out, I was very happy about that, and I was very happy to see that he was doing that and changing the language back to their normal dialect and getting that language of French language out of the area. And but look at how many times they didn't try to kill this man since he came into power there. So he still got to watch his back. But I do think there is something to what he's doing. I like what he's doing. I think we need more of what he's doing to spread on the continent. And then, that can just spread out everywhere. We have our grassroots here that we're doing things. And, we're just going to have to spread the word and we're going to have to stick together, like you said. But again, a lot of what we deal with is specific to us. I'm not saying that other melanated people don't come here and deal with it. They do. And there was just a sister on there talking about African sister talking about how she was like, how you Black Americans deal with this? She was like, how do y'all do this? Because I guess she came here and then she's experiencing all this racism from her workplace, from her white colleagues. And I said in there, I said, there's plenty of ways that we dealt with to cope with it. I said, but what we need y'all to do is stop believing in these stereotypes that they give y'all when y'all come here about us, and get on code with us, and then we can teach you about what you're going to experience when you get out there in the world. You know what I'm saying? Then we can be a force together. And really, that's why we fought for the Immigration Act to be repealed back in the 60s when we did the Civil Rights Act. That's why we were fighting for that as well. Because in our minds, we're going to get them to come here, and we're going to get together, we're going to overthrow this shit. But boy, did they have different plans, right? Boy, did the dominant society have a different idea and a different plan. And their plan has worked out well. Of course, they've planned it over years of planning it. So I'm just saying that to say, like, they don't want that. They don't want us getting on, and having resources through them, and really building and getting, having relationships with the independent nations in Africa, because they know that we can build resources, and we can really build bridges, and we can really do things to deploy to overthrow, because this is a system of oppression that we're in. We are in a system of oppression and suppression, and that's happening again across all these 11 areas of activity, which are on the stage: education, economics, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war, health, and agriculture. So the health, we did the healthcare disparities last week, and agriculture is a whole nother thing. Even though we touched on food deserts, but the food is being poisoned, and the food that they put in the hood is, you know, we talked about that a little bit last week, but it's, we get all the bad food and all the expensive food, it costs a lot. Then when we do go to a Whole Foods, they follow us like we're stealing everything. So you can't even shop in peace. So yeah, it's definitely time. But yeah, I wanted to mention that I do really love what the brothers doing over there on the continent, and we need more of that. We need
I
more of
think
that
he
on the
has the
continent,
blueprint.
in the Caribbean, and here in the Americas.
That's what I'm saying. But he has the blueprint. But one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that he's willing to do is by any means necessary. And I just don't think people here have that heart. Right. We're
No,
not, yeah, yeah, yeah. But
we're
he,
not there yet. I don't think we're
yeah.
all the way there yet. We're getting there. We're getting there, but we're not there.
But what I'm
We're not
talking about is like how the Black Panthers were on code. You know what I'm saying? They moved militant. They had their guns on their shoulder, they were dressed in black, their boots, doing formations, doing all that good stuff. I just don't think, this generation is about that life, at the end of the day. We talk about we want freedom, but how far are you willing to go for it? And if you're not willing to put your life on the line for the freedom that you said that you want, then how serious are you about it?
Our men want a podcast. Look, I'm podcasting right now, but you know what we know, what else we need to talk about? We could probably do a topic on this is about that global movement and the factions and the divisions there. Like we have Pan Africanism versus ADOS versus FBA and all of those kind of factions and divisions. So maybe we should have do a topic on that and talk about how we can recognize the differences but still unite and work together.
But you know what? Also, they said that whole African thing with the Psyop that was started back in the late 60s and 70s to get Black people to focus on moving to Africa and Africanism instead of fixing the problems that were here, homegrown in America, right? Because if they get you to take your ass over there, then we ain't got to worry about you over here. And you're not here to fix the problems that are affecting your people here. So, we have to look at the bigger picture. Yeah, it's all nice to dream about Africa and moving there and whatnot, but that doesn't fix the issues here for what's going on. And it is definitely a psyop because a lot of us, a lot of the Black people back then was like, oh, we're all from Africa, when we didn't have the research and the knowledge to say, hey, that's not true, right? Because remember the brainwashing that happened in the 70s with the whole roots thing and all that stuff, and that's when that whole African thing started popping up, and everybody started quoting Garvey about going to Africa and all that stuff.
Yeah, and again, you said all that, and you very much said a mouthful, Queen, because it is that. And the bigger part to that I'm going to expound on right now is not just about going there to not work on the problems here. Going there and leaving our homeland forfeits any of our rights to our land. See,
Yeah.
they know when they get us off the land, then they don't have to worry about the theft that they took from us. See, as long as we're still here, there's still a chance for us, the freedom fight, to get our land back, to get our rights back, to do all that and to stand up together. But if they try to say, oh, go back to Africa, and this is what I'm going to go back to the Marcus Garvey thing.
when you really do the research, you see Carter G. Woodson, he knew. See, that was before Roots, right? That was a time frame before Roots. So he knew that this was his land. He knew his lineage. He knew about the slave trade. Some of the Africans came over, yeah, but he knew we were already here. So when Garvey was coming with all that rhetoric, trying to meet with the KKK to send just us back to Africa, which a lot of the things that, and I'm not here to diss Marcus Garvey because he did some good things and all that kind of stuff, but you got to vet people because when you vet him and you look at his history and all that, really he did a lot of things for money grabs or for money bags and for his own self-worth and his own self-wealth. So you have to look at people and you have to vet them. And I do, I'm cool with doing that topic, what Nick's talking about, because it really needs to be talked about. And really, a lot of the N ones on this land, we all really the same. So you just fighting over a damn title. So to me, I'll say certain things, but at the end of the day, we're all one people. If you want to call yourself a Israelite, if you think you're a Moor, if you're an Indian, you're American Indian, you're FBA, foundational Black American, you're ADOS, a descendant of slaves and all that. Whatever you feel comfortable with calling yourself, but at the end of the day, that's all one culture. So as soon as we can get that label bias out of our mind and know that we're one culture and we're one people who need to come together, then the quicker that we can get on with the business that we need to get on with, because we fighting over stupid shit.
It would be nice for us to have a monolithic view of that, but a lot of people are going to give resistance to that because they don't want to, ruffle feathers per se.
And not only that though, but we are different tribes though, because we weren't all just one big Black tribe.
I know what I'm saying. We're not.
Yeah, so there are people. Yeah, there are people who feel like that. You got your lineage here. You do your genealogy and see where your lineage goes. That's why I kept saying that all month. Do your genealogy. Do your genealogy.
But what I will say this, Queen, is the fact that the commonality that we all have is that we have the same oppressor, the same dominant culture, who's either waging some type of colonialism on the people or oppressing them through slavery in some kind of way, right? It's economic slavery or what have you. Because look at what they're doing to the people in Africa who are mining in those mines, right, for pennies, working long hours, right, and won't give them nothing. And they're pulling their own resource to be sold somewhere else when they should be benefiting from their own land. And that's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So for us to come together, it's going to take a lot. I know that. And then also looking at the history, because I know we were talking about Carter G. Woodson and Marcus Garvey, but we also have other Black leaders from the past that have spun us a narrative and put us in the same place too. Booker T. Washington, W.E. Du Bois, right? Both of them were both talking about that integration mess and having us work together with the white people, Black people being in their place and being docile and stuff like that. And I just don't think that narrative served us well at all. Right, we try to play the game of being nice, but that doesn't get us anywhere.
I agree. You can't, that's like the old saying, you can't bring a knife to a gunfight.
The Obamas, when they go low, we go high. Like, nah, we going low too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we going to hell. Shit, that's where I'm going.
Right, like I'm going
That's
low.
where I'm going, because I'm not going to allow you to disrespect me, disrespect my lineage, my culture, none of that. Like the day of that is over for a lot of us being scared and frightened. A lot of us still are, but a lot of us, that day is over. You know what I mean? And you see that, and they're calling it, I forget what they're calling it, but they have like a little thing out there called Leave Black People Alone, where you see all these people like harassing us just normally on the street. And we like, you're doing too much extra shit, you get knocked out. Like, you're gonna get laid out. So you can, FAFO if you want to, not trying to condone violence, but if you think you're going to meet us with violence and we're going to meet you with kumbaya, then you got another thing coming. Because one thing about this new generation is they are standing on that business, and the grassroots is standing on that business. So
but you got to meet people where they are, because they meet you with violence.
Yeah.
You got to meet them with the same thing. And for me, it's all about self-preservation, right? I mean, you're going to come at me that way, I'm going to come at you that way, and that's just the way it's going to be. And then also going back to some past episodes, it makes me think about the first movie that was ever produced that was a popular hit in America was The Birth of a Nation, right? Which is supposed to tell the origin of this country, and what it was based upon was racism, right? And the fact that we were supposed to be enslaved and captured and stuff like that. So I mean, we have a long history of them wanting to keep us oppressed and it's still being done through Hollywood. And for us, it's just breaking out of those images and those stereotypes and figuring out solutions to where we can be sovereign within this framework.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that Birth of the Nation was the first, like you said, the first movie, and that was the jump off of the entertainment industry. That's when they, like I said, realized that they can make buku hella money and they can control narratives by the things that they put out. And that's when they first start to set out to make sure that anything that Black people appeared in were subservient, or in
Lazy.
slavery, or yeah, like something subservient, basically, like down in us. And that's really where it all started. It started right from the beginning. And that's why I be saying that people try to act like this stuff's not going on. This whole nation's built on it. Like when you look at it's founded on it. So what you think is going to be different now? It's founded on that premise, and that's the way it's thrived all these years. And until we change it, it's going to be like that.
All right, so oh god, look, this was a good topic, y'all. I hope you guys are enjoying this episode because there's a lot to unpack here. We're still pulling our clothes out the bag, right? We still got more to unpack, and trust me, we'll probably revisit this topic again because it's so many layers to this, and we'll talk about the different fractions that we operate in as far as Black people and see how we can come together as one view and come together against the oppressor and not one another. But let's jump into the solutions. So keep the record document, demand transparency, build legal defense and advocacy funds, right? People set up GoFundMe. That's what they did for Carmelo, but I don't know what exactly happened with that. Teach complete history, practice collective protection, meaning that we got to stick together, y'all. I mean, we need to work in groups in order to protect ourselves because they work in groups, right? They organize. We need to have organizations to basically help us in our journey because you can't do this alone. And another thing is, once we have a good collective as far as people who are on the same page, then we can move from reaction to institution building, right? Because no longer do we need to react. We can get a game plan together and we can build from there. So some of these solutions, I know that a lot of you guys, we talked about some of them, especially about the history and making sure that you're consistent and going back in the research and making sure the history is documented correctly. You definitely want to do that. And then we also have the question for the week, which is, so we're on the 250th anniversary of America, right? Being free from England, because we weren't free when this happened. So in what ways do you feel that we are still enslaved? Like what ways do you feel enslaved still in this country, right? We are at that 250th year anniversary. You as a Black person, what ways do you still feel oppressed and enslaved in this country, right? But we no longer walk around with the shackles. We're no longer on plantations, but we're still being affected by imprisonment, right? And it's not imprisonment as far as you being in a cell. It's economic imprisonment, right? A medical imprisonment, right? From these different institutions, legal, right? All these different institutions are working against us on some level. So what ways do you feel that? All right, so we are getting ready to land the plane for tonight. Does anyone have any last words that they would like to leave the people with?
Peace, love, kings and queens up to the melanated nation across the globe.
All right, so thank you again for tuning in for another great episode of Dreams, Dollars, and Destiny. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed making it. And again, like, subscribe, and share this episode out with someone who could benefit from this information. And enjoy your holiday, y'all. Take care.